We are going to start here with the March for Our Lives. And here's the big question on this morning after. What next? After all the dramatic speeches by the young survivors of gun violence, after all the celebrity appearances, after all the marches across the country and the world, can this movement produce any real change?
There's no question the images were searing. This little boy in New York City holding a sign that reads, "I can't even bring peanut butter to school." And in Montgomery, Alabama, a little girl asks, "Am I next?"
Scenes like these today, shootings at schools, an all too familiar sight now across this country. This shooting, by one count, the 18th just this year. Multiple fatalities at several of those shootings.
On February 14th, 2018, Florida experienced its worst shooting in recent history. A single gunman entered Stoneman Douglas High School and took the lives of 17 students, teachers, and staff, while injuring at least a dozen others. With similar events to this happening far too often, many activist groups have begun using these tragedies as fuel to support their beliefs and hopes of a gun-free nation. While the Second Amendment still remains a right of the American citizen, it is clear something must be done in order to ensure the safety and well-being of American children while still allowing people to freely practice their rights.
In an attempt to prevent these types of tragedies, there are background checks in order to obtain firearms. In bold print at the top of the form, it reads, "Warning, you may not receive a firearm if prohibited by federal or state law. The information you provide will be used to determine whether you are prohibited from receiving a firearm. Certain violations of the Gun Control Act are punishable by up to 10 years imprisonment and/or up to a $250,000 fine." The obtainer of the gun permit is required to honestly answer these questions on the form. Questions that ask if they are a criminal or if they have ever been committed to a mental institution. These forms are carefully reviewed over so that gun permits are placed in the hands of responsible gun owners. Background checks, however, do not stop criminals. Laws do not stop criminals either. So what can we do in this situation?
A strong factor for the debate for gun control from either side is the Second Amendment. For the gun control side of the spectrum, they say things such as it only applied to muskets at the time, or that the amendment itself has no bearing in today's standards, even though it is still a right in the Constitution. Though for the pro-gun side, the second has not only meant a way to defend oneself from others as for protection, its true meaning was a way for citizens to defend themselves from any potential threat from a tyrannical government. Though we are talking about how a common ground should be reached, it is very hard since both sides refuse to see the other. For example, the extremes. Pro-gun doesn't want to change anything at all, and that wouldn't even begin to stop some of the tragedies that have occurred.
Thankfully, organizations such as the NRA and the Brady Campaign are actively working together with the goal of finding a mutual solution.
Some possibilities that are currently being discussed by both parties are increased and stricter background checks, raising the age to buy a gun, banning attachments such as bump stocks, arming teachers, and more.
These are just a few solutions that are attempts at pleasing both the anti-gun activists and those who choose to exercise their right of the Second Amendment. The problem with more strenuous background checks arises when a buyer needs a firearm urgently when he or she feels that their life is in danger. A situation Carol Bowney unfortunately found herself in.
A compelling reason why we can't abolish the Second Amendment is self-defense. Many people own a gun to use as protection should the time ever come where they are in a threatening situation. Still not convinced? We found a particular article titled "When Gun Control Kills." This is a story of a woman named Carol Bown. Carol was 39 when she was murdered outside her home in New Jersey. Carol had successfully filed a restraining order against her violent ex-boyfriend. On top of the restraining order, she installed security cameras and an alarm system. She still didn't feel safe, so she began the labyrinth process for purchasing a firearm, as Eric Pratt calls it. She applied for the permit April 21st, 2015, and was still waiting for permission to purchase a firearm on June 3rd when her ex-boyfriend showed up at her house and stabbed her to death. New Jersey law requires that firearm purchaser IDs be issued within 30 days. Carol had been waiting for 43.
In order to learn more about the topic of gun control and to help us understand the process behind background checks, we traveled all the way to Bud's gun shop to meet with Doug Ramsey and ask him a few questions. Doug is the Director of Outreach, Education, and Training at Bud's, while still serving as the Chief Compliance Officer. Here's what he and co-owner Joe Murphy had to say on the topic.
What's your opinion on the push to alter the Second Amendment in America?
Well, what we see is significant effort has been made to alter the perception of what the Second Amendment means. By that I'm referring to people who will say that they think the Second Amendment only applies to organized militia, and perhaps more importantly, those people who say the Second Amendment does not justify individual self-defense, nor protect the ability of the populace to take back self-government from the control of a rogue regime or militaries, foreign and domestic. And additionally, I think it's critical to add that your rights are only good if you have the ability to embrace your rights. No words on paper can do that for you. The Constitution guarantees that, but it's the power built into the Second Amendment that protects all the other rights.
Okay. Awesome. What is something that you feel the other side or the anti-gun activists is not considering when they propose these new laws?
Something on that?
I do, but I'll let you go
Okay,
first.
well, I would hope that in proposing laws regarding, let's say, high-capacity magazines or so-called assault weapon bans, these folks realize that these actions do nothing to prevent crimes. It's not as if it's a theory that maybe we should test. It's already been tested for 10 years. So from 1994 to 2004 was the so-called assault weapons ban. It began under the Clinton administration. And everything that I've read about that has basically, all the analysis has basically considered that 10-year period with that law ineffective for reducing crime. Keep in mind, laws are passed only for those who will follow the law. Criminals don't pay any attention to laws. And if a law-abiding person is unable to purchase a firearm of his or her choice, I can assure you that criminals will still be able to do so. What I would say is, look at it realistically. There are 270 to 300 million firearms out there in the United States right now. So you can assure me that because you pass a law that restricts my rights as a responsible person who passes a background check, that I can't buy a gun from a dealer, that now a criminal can't get a gun. So that kind of attitude doesn't take into consideration really that, like I said, 270 to 300 million firearms. I think the horse is already out of the barn. So just creating more laws is not going to change anything.
And how do you think our leaders should attack the gun violence / school shooting problem?
That's a really good question. The only thing that I can tell you, I think, is probably, I believe Joe will agree with me, that we think prevention and planning can go a long way toward helping to stop active shooters before it ever gets to that problem. Maybe easier said than done, and I don't want to simplify it, but more conversations and talking with students early on in attempts to find those people who are disenchanted or disenfranchised or feel bullied, more training to help identify those individuals who may have a propensity to violence, more open environments where others are encouraged to speak up with their concerns, and enhanced security at schools, which might include metal detectors and armed security, and whether that security is armed teachers is certainly a matter for debate and currently up for discussion, but there are schools that have adopted that policy. So my recommendation would be probably those things, to ask leaders to look at those things, early intervention to try to prevent those incidents from ever reaching the point where that active shooter goes through this long litany of preparation and grievance and acquiring the tools and scouting out the school, all the things that an active shooter always goes through before they ever reach the point where they finally pull the trigger.
Okay.
The National Shooting Sports Foundation, which is a national trade association with the mission to promote, protect, and preserve hunting and shooting sports, released an economic impact report from the firearms industry for the United States. In this report, it states that there are well over 300,000 jobs, and it creates a lot of revenue for the U.S., around $51 billion. A complete ban would affect these people much more severely than anyone who just owns a gun or shoots a gun. And the gun control side may not see this point of view, and this hurts finding a common ground as well.
After researching this topic and gathering this information, we feel as though we've come up with some possible solutions to help curb the problem of violence in our communities. First of all, banning all firearms is not the right way to bring about change. We believe more efficient steps that should be taken are more thorough background checks, institute a title or deed system similar to a house or a car that would state who the lawful owner of the firearm is, and most importantly, provide help for the mentally ill in our country. We understand that these solutions alone will not bring about change in our nation right away, but it is a good place to start.
That's what this country was founded on. Well, we might as well give up and run if we let them take our guiding gun. So you say your prayers and you thank the Lord for that peacemaker in the dresser drawer.